He's a friend from work.
We all remember the thrill of seeing all of the Avengers assembled on screen together for the first time, but what if it wasn't actually the first time? Okay, so maybe they weren't always the Avengers.
I want to have his adopted babies.
But seeing our favorite Marvel stars cross paths in different movies years before they would don their super suits and team up to save the universe still gives us a thrill. Today, we're taking a look at all of the times that Marvel actors appeared on screen together way before they were the megastars they are today.
Now, shall we begin?
Every actor has to get their start somewhere, and for people like Chris Evans, it's usually in the romantic comedy genre. Evans had done his fair share of rom-coms before stepping into the role of Captain America, what with his movie star looks and undeniable charm. But one of these rom-coms actually introduced him to two other future Marvel stars, Chris Pratt and Anthony Mackie. The movie is called What's Your Number, all about a young woman who goes back through all of the men that she's dated to see if any of them turn out to be the one. While Pratt and Mackie both play two of her past loves, Evans plays her next-door neighbor who seems like he might be totally wrong for her until he isn't. Oh, and the movie stars Anna Faris, who went on to marry Chris Pratt. You might have thought that you hadn't seen Mark Ruffalo and Brie Larson on screen in the same movie until Captain Marvel showed up to give the Avengers a hand, but actually, there is one other time that these two actors appeared together. Well, not quite together, but close enough. They were both in the beloved Jennifer Garner movie 13 Going on 30, in which Garner plays an unpopular 13-year-old who one day wakes up to find herself all grown up. In the film, you can catch Larson for a few moments as one of the popular girls who teases the younger version of Garner in the 80s, and Mark Ruffalo plays none other than the very grown-up version of her high school sweetheart. Before he would go on to direct one of the biggest superhero movies of all time and effectively launch the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, Jon Favreau made a career for himself as an actor, which you can tell by how well he plays the right-hand man of Iron Man, Happy Hogan. And long before he stepped into the MCU himself, Paul Rudd has been one of the best comic actors in Hollywood for decades. You can spot these two acting opposite one another in the ultimate bromance comedy, or brom-com, I Love You Man. All about Rudd's character on a mission to make some male friends in order to have groomsmen at his wedding. This heartwarming comedy also stars Jason Segel and Rashida Jones, and is definitely the reason why all of your friends started listening to Rush and using the phrase slap at a bass for years to come. If you didn't already know, Jon Favreau is a well-connected guy, so when he decided to make a passion project about a discontented chef who decides to get out of the Michelin star game and into the world of food trucks, he called in the big guns, and by big guns, we of course mean Robert Downey Jr. While Downey Jr. only has a quick cameo in the film, he does what he does best and absolutely sells it, playing the antagonist to Favreau's character. Oh, yeah, and Scarlett Johansson also shares the screen as Favreau's restaurant front-of-house manager turned girlfriend. If anyone could assemble these soon-to-be Avengers to co-star in an independent movie, there is no doubt that Jon Favreau is the guy to do it. Remember what we said earlier about some actors getting their start in the rom-com genre? Well, Scarlett Johansson knows a thing or two about that as well. While she actually has a varied and interesting movie career behind her, she starred in her fair share of rom-coms as well, including The Nanny Diaries, opposite none other than Chris Evans. Evans plays the guy who Johansson's character can't help but fall in love with because, let's be honest, who could? Yet this isn't the first time that they shared the screen. They were also in 2004's The Perfect Score, playing a couple of high school students willing to do anything to ace their SATs. One thing has become clear to us in the process of making this video, and that is, Chris Evans knows everybody. We're not surprised that many Hollywood directors want to work with the notoriously nice guy, and this has led him to having more Marvel crossovers than any other actor in the MCU. This time, it was with Brie Larson in the smash hit Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. The Edgar Wright movie, adapted from the beloved original graphic novel, starred Michael Cera as Scott Pilgrim, a young guy from Toronto who suddenly finds himself having to battle the 7 evil ex-boyfriends of his new love interest, Ramona Flowers. Chris Evans plays one of those exes, Lucas Lee, and Brie Larson appears as the rock star who broke Scott's heart, Envy Adams. Both Mark Ruffalo and Gwyneth Paltrow have been working in Hollywood for a long time now, and so it makes sense that they were bound to have worked together before their time in the Avengers. While the Hulk and Pepper Potts don't really interact all that much in the MCU, the same cannot be said for Ruffalo and Paltrow, who have actually starred opposite one another not once, but twice. The first time was in the much-maligned flight attendant comedy View from the Top in 2003, before teaming up once again in 2012's Thank You for Sharing. In Thank You for Sharing, Ruffalo plays a man recovering from a very intimate addiction, and Paltrow plays the woman he accidentally gets involved with. It also stars Josh Gad and Pink in a rare acting role. Mark Ruffalo may be the other actor on this list battling Chris Evans for his top spot of hardest working actor in Hollywood, as he too has acted alongside a handful of his MCU counterparts more than once. David Fincher fans will definitely remember the time that he played opposite Robert Downey Jr. in the sprawling crime drama Zodiac. Based on the decades-long manhunt for the infamous Zodiac Slayer in San Francisco, the movie charts both the police investigation and the reporters covering the ever-expanding crime wave. It should also be noted that the film also stars a future MCU recruit, Jake Gyllenhaal, long before he put on the cape, became Mysterio, and went after our beloved Spider-Man. It's always a bit of a thrill seeing two Marvel stars cross paths in a movie, but what about when a young gang of them not only start together in one film, but an entire franchise? That's exactly what happened in the Star Trek films, which saw Chris Hemsworth, Zoe Saldana, and Benedict Cumberbatch all acting together in one of the biggest movie franchises of all time. In the films, Hemsworth plays Captain Kirk's father, George Kirk, Saldana steps in as Uhura, and Benedict plays the evil villain Khan. Funnily enough, Hemsworth originally auditioned for Captain James Kirk along with two other Hollywood Chris's, Pratt and Pine. Pine, of course, won out in the end, and is also the only Hollywood Chris not to join the MCU. When you think of iconic duos, chances are the names Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson aren't the first that come to mind, but actually these two love working together and have done so multiple times in and outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before she was Captain Marvel, the pair starred opposite one another in the epic Kong Skull Island. They then went on to play together in the independent film Unicorn Store, which Larson directed in 2017. Their dynamic was definitely one of the high points of the Captain Marvel movie, and now we know why. This unlikely pair have had a lot of time to develop their fun, easy chemistry on screen. Before he was a raccoon and she was Gamora, Bradley Cooper and Zoe Saldana start together in a very different, yet equally ambitious movie from 2012 called The Words. The Words mostly follows Cooper's character, a down-on-his-luck writer named Rory Jansen, and his wife Dora. One day, Dora and Rory come across a vintage briefcase in an antique store, and she buys it for him, not knowing that inside is a manuscript that has long been forgotten. Rory decides to publish it as his own work, and immediately becomes famous. Little does he know, he'll have to pay a much greater price for stealing someone else's work. The movie also stars Jeremy Irons, Dennis Quaid, and Olivia Wilde. There was probably no one out there more surprised than Paul Rudd himself when he found out that he was going to be the next big Marvel superhero in Ant-Man. While we love Rudd, and he's been around for a long time, he's always been more of a comic relief than the crime-fighting type of actor. He has since changed all of our minds by being one of the best additions to the MCU ever, but we can't forget just where he came from. And neither can Bradley Cooper, because they did so together. We're of course talking about the iconic comedy cult hit Wet Hot American Summer, which starred just about every comedy giant working today. Rudd plays Andy, the bad boy teenage camp counselor, while Cooper took on the role of Ben while he was still attending NYU's Tisch School for the Arts. An essential part of being a member of the Avengers is being prepared to go into battle at a moment's notice. In fact, there isn't a Marvel movie out there that doesn't feature some kind of city-destroying throwdown at the very least, and yet in 2008, Anthony Mackie and Jeremy Renner starred in a very different type of war movie, and one that hits a little closer to home. The pair appeared opposite one another in Catherine Bigelow's Oscar-winning The Hurt Locker as two American soldiers in the middle of the Iraq War. They would then go on to fight in the battle against Thanos together, though that would feature a lot more CGI and a lot less real-world sky-high stakes. While most of us would never want to cross paths with Thanos, the same cannot be said for the actor who plays him, Josh Brolin. Brolin is one of those amazing old-school Hollywood stars who elevates just about every movie that he's in, and the same can be said for the other two actors who shared the screen with him in the 2013 Oldboy remake, Elizabeth Olsen and Samuel L. Jackson. While some question why Spike Lee decided to remake the notoriously incredible Oldboy, everyone can agree that he did a good thing by casting these three powerhouses in it long before they would come together in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There are a ton of amazing British actors out there, and it's really only a matter of time until they'll get the chance to act with one another. For most, it will happen more than once, but not everyone can say the same about crossing paths in both the British and American movies. Tom Hiddleston and Benedict Cumberbatch, however, definitely can. Not only are they both two of the MCU's biggest stars, but they have also appeared together in the period drama War Horse. Set in World War I and directed by Steven Spielberg, War Horse is an epic story about a friendship between a boy and his horse, and is absolutely determined to make you cry. Even though Jane Foster and Black Widow have never crossed paths in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Natalie Portman and Scarlett Johansson definitely have. Most famously, they starred as the two warring sisters in 2008's The Other Boleyn Girl. While they may look nothing like sisters in real life, these two powerful actresses were perfectly cast as Anne and Mary Boleyn, who became entangled with King Henry VIII during his reign. While Anne eventually went on to be queen before meeting a far more gruesome fate, the movie aims to tell the story of how they got to their positions in the first place after being urged by their father to seduce the king and provide him with a male heir. Sometimes it's easy to forget that Bradley Cooper is even in the MCU because we never actually see his face. He does such a great job at altering his voice to play the character of Rocket that we often forget who it is behind the little raccoon with attitude. He achieved a similar effect in 2013's American Hustle, as his curly wig, beard, and 1970s costumes help camouflage him almost entirely. Not quite enough to forget that he is starring in the movie, however, and definitely not enough for us not to realize that he's there opposite Hawkeye himself, Jeremy Renner. The entire cast is crammed with some of Hollywood's biggest stars alongside the pair, including Jennifer Lawrence, Amy Adams, and Christian Bale. Move over Chris Pine and Mark Ruffalo, Bradley Cooper and ScarJo are coming for ya. These two have also starred in tons of movies with oodles of Hollywood royalty, including each other. Back in the early 2010s, Hollywood had a thing for romantic comedies that starred not 2, but 10 of the biggest stars in the world, and He's Just Not That Into You is a perfect example of that. In this movie adaptation of the popular self-help book, Cooper plays a married man who becomes tempted into an affair with the beautiful Johansson, but that's not all. The movie also features the likes of Jennifer Aniston, Ben Affleck, Jennifer Connelly, and Justin Long, among others. While Gwyneth Paltrow may not remember starring in any Spider-Man movies or any Marvel movies at all, we're pretty sure she remembers being in the featured directorial debut of one of the greatest American filmmakers, Paul Thomas Anderson. Paltrow starred in Hard 8 opposite none other than Samuel L. Jackson, who may have also lost count of the amount of Marvel movies he's been in so far. But even though they all shoot back to back and have a lot of similarities, there are few experiences out there for an actor quite like being in a PTA movie, and since he's gone on to be one of the most successful and respected directors ever, we can guess and we're hoping that both Paltrow and Jackson will never forget the experience. When you've been in as many movies as some of these actors have, it's actually pretty reasonable that they might forget a thing or two over the years. For most of us, meeting Scarlett Johansson would be a pretty memorable experience, but for Brie Larson, she did not quite recall the first time these two crossed paths, which happened to be on the set of Joseph Gordon Levitt's Don Jon. Larson admitted on Ellen that she didn't remember their meeting, but we can't really blame her. In the film, she plays Don Jon's sister and spends 99% of the film staring at her BlackBerry. Johansson plays his love interest and remembered Larson clearly. If all you remembered from The Martian was Matt Damon growing potatoes in space, don't fret, because that's pretty much all we retained too. But when we went back to look, we realized that the movie actually featured an MCU crossover. That's right, both Sebastian Stan and Benedict Wong co-star in The Martian alongside Damon. Well, not alongside him exactly, but they are both definitely in the movie. Another Marvel co-star who crossed paths on screen with Doctor Strange's Benedict Wong is Tessa Thompson, who featured in the awesomely weird sci-fi film Annihilation, as did Wong. Wong plays one of the scientists responsible for interviewing Natalie Portman's character after she makes it out of the Shimmer, and Thompson plays a member of her team who enters into the unknown alongside her, which actually gives us another MCU crossover, as these two women are both featured in the Thor and Avengers movies together. While we love them as the polar opposite Thor and Valkyrie anytime they appear together in the MCU, we were also big fans of Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth starring together in the recent Men in Black update. They have a great on-screen chemistry that never gets old, and even though we'll be saying goodbye to Hemsworth as Thor, we hope they keep popping up in movies together, even if they are not in the Marvel Universe. Anyone who has seen Tom Holland as Spider-Man can attest that the actor was born to be a star. But even before he appeared as the web slinger in Captain America Civil War, he had a connection to the MCU through none other than Chris Hemsworth. Holland and Hemsworth start together in 2015's In the Heart of the Sea, a Ron Howard-directed epic about the sinking of a New England whaling ship in the 1820s, which inspired the classic tale Moby Dick. Even at a young age, Holland proved that he could hold his own against one of the biggest stars in the world. And finally, we couldn't not end this video with another Chris Evans connection, because just like the rest of the world, we just can't get enough. This time, Evans starred alongside Zoe Saldana in 2010's The Losers, an action comedy based off of a comic book of the same name. The story of an elite group of highly skilled operatives who find themselves betrayed by someone on the inside after a mission to Bolivia also stars Idris Elba and Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Like in the angle of the dangle?
Well, when they say Hollywood is a small town, they mean it. What did you think of these non-Marvel crossovers? Did we miss any good ones that we just gotta know about? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to click subscribe to Screen Rant to keep up to date with all the latest videos. See ya!